Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome again to another edition of our HR in the Time of Pandemic free webinar. Today we have a very special topic and a very special guest. Medyo in demand ang topic na ito right now, particularly since meron lang bagong kalalabas na guidelines from DOLE and IATF regarding the handling of COVID cases, especially in the workplace. So, for this afternoon, we have with us a very special person. I've actually worked with her in the past, and I've been friends with her for quite some time now. So let me just briefly introduce her to you. Our special guest for this afternoon is none other than Attorney Melody Pakaige, or Mel as her friends, as we call her. She has been a human resource professional for about 15 years now. So ganun ka in-depth ang kanyang background when it comes to HR. After graduating from Ateneo de Manila University with a degree in legal management, she pursued her Juris Doctor degree from the Ateneo Law School. While waiting for the results of the bar exams, Mel joined the Teleperformance family as an employee relations specialist, handling just about 500 employees back in 2005. She was tasked with handling disciplinary cases and was with Teleperformance as it grew from having less than 100 employees to its current workforce about 48,000 across several sites across the Philippines. TP is one of the largest call centers that we have right now. From being a business partner, Mel focused on legal and compliance for the company, and she now leads a team which provides guidance to the company on legal matters, most especially those which are labor impacting, and liaises also with government agencies representing the company in civil, criminal, and other cases. Mel is also a member of the Speak Up Committee, which is the local grievance machinery of the company, and she also heads the Committee on Decorum and Investigation, which handles sexual harassment cases. During her free time, Mel loves listening to endless stories of her two very cute children. Ayan. So yan po ang ating speaker for today. But before anything else po, pasensya na po sa namamaos na boses na naman. I would just like to plug a few items before I give her the floor. So I would like to invite everyone po to join our HR Bootcamp Batch 13. If you would like to be part of the Batch 13, this is the link that you have to head to, or you can just take a screenshot of the QR code. You can use this QR code in order to register or reserve a slot for the HR Bootcamp. Okay, this is one of our paid webinars, and this is happening on October 16 and 17. If ever you would want to be one of our sponsors, we are also offering sponsorship packages. We have bronze, which is our free package, silver and gold package. The gold package will have you listed as one of our co-organizers. Kung interested po kayo. We would also like to seek your help. We have some of our friends who are currently experiencing some challenges right now. So if you are interested po in helping, we would like to ask for your help for Andre. He was diagnosed with acute lymphoblastic leukemia last June 10, 2020 and is continuously in need of medication. He dreams of becoming a pilot someday. His father is a flight attendant and has always been a source of inspiration and pure bliss of his family. He can do with your help right now. So if you would want to be one of his heroes, ito po yung mga bank details where you can send in your donations or your support or your help po para po matulungan natin si Andre. The numbers and all the slides that will be used today will be sent to you, including a recording of the video. So if ever you have connectivity issues later on, pwede nyo pa po ma-review or mapanood ulit yung ating video. One of our co-HRs is also asking for help for her father. If you have watched our first edition of our Help, I'm an HR, one of our panelists, Monica Nalda, her father is currently in the hospital in ICU. So if ever you would want to provide help or just want to provide words of encouragement, ito po yung kanyang Globe number. Yan din po ang kanyang GCash number. If you would want to provide financial assistance, andyan po ang kanyang BPI number. Any help po will be appreciated. Okay? And then, humihingi din po ng tulong ang Pet Warehouse. If you're a bookkeeper or know someone who wants to be a bookkeeper, they have an opening right now for a bookkeeper. So they just need someone with a proven bookkeeping experience and willing to work in Bambang Pasig. If you're interested, please send po your resume to work at petwarehouse.ph. Ayan po. Kailangan din po ng uprush ng senior software engineer for one of our clients. If you're interested po, just send your resume to support at readyrightnow.com, and we will endorse you to our client. Okay? And then we also have Iuno Media Philippines. They are in need of subtitle editors. They're pooling right now for subtitle editors. So if you're interested po in becoming subtitle editors, you can head to their Facebook page for more info about this position. Okay. If you haven't liked yet our Facebook page, please do so. This will give you an advance notice for our free webinars, and for all our other paid trainings and paid webinars. Yan po. We have an upcoming webinar po on August 19. It's building your corporate culture. If you're interested in attending, you can take a screenshot of our QR code. This will bring you to our registration page for you to reserve your slot. Okay po? So yan po. Again, magandang hapon po sa inyong lahat. This is actually one of our biggest webinars so far. We were not expecting to get a lot of registrants for today. For those who were unable to register, we'll give you instructions later on how you can register so that you can get your certificate of attendance. Facebook is limiting us to about 500 registrants only. Unfortunately, we we have reached 750, so yung iba hindi na po nakapagpa-register. So if you haven't registered po, mamaya po bibigyan po namin kayo ng instructions on how you can go about with your registration. So again, maraming salamat po sa pag-join sa amin this afternoon, and without further ado, I think it's time for me to give the floor to our guest, Attorney Mel Policarpo. Welcome, Attorney. Yes po.
Hi, Ron.
Ayan.
Good afternoon. Thank you for this opportunity. So, hi everyone. Good afternoon to all our
Okay
attendees.
po.
So, I hope you have an enjoyable session with us. I know the country has been going through this pandemic since late of last year, and the Department of Labor has had several issuances on how the employees may be protected and how the employers may be guided on ways to address the adverse effects of this pandemic. So I'll start the sharing of screen.
Yes po. I'll give the floor na po sa iyo, Attorney, para po makapag-discuss ka na.
So, Ron, can you see us? We're good?
Yes po, we're good na.
Okay. So this session is a summary of several Department of Labor and Employment issuances. We start with Labor Advisory number 9, which was issued on March 4, 2020. As you guys can remember, even if the pandemic has started way back fourth quarter of 2019, the effects weren't really felt, at least in the Philippines, not until the first quarter of 2020. And in March 15, it was declared that the country will be placed on enhanced community quarantine, or ECQ. So again, Labor Advisory number 9 states the guidelines on the implementation of flexible work arrangements as remedial measures due to COVID-19 pandemic, such as first, the reduction of work hours and or work days. So this happens when a certain number of employees are given less than the 8-hour per day work day or limited number of days per week. And then there's also rotation of workers. So in relation to the first one, other employees may be assigned to work only for about 2-3 days in 1 week. And then the second part of the week would be given to the other employees. The third one, as covered by this advisory, is the furlough or the temporary layoff, or when you are forced to use your leave credit. So why did DOLE issue this? Well, basically, it is one of the ways by which DOLE feels that closure of business or outright redundancy or retrenchment of employees may be avoided. The next issuance is labor advisory number 11. Well, if you're looking for labor advisory number 10, it's just the service charge implementation date. So we didn't include it anymore since it's not related to the pandemic. So labor advisory number 11 is the supplemental guidelines on the use basically of your leave credits during the quarantine period. It was during this time when a lot of employees were asking, how do I get paid? I'm not reporting for work. Not a lot of employers at that time were ready to have their employees paid, yet they're not working. So it was clarified even by Secretary Sylvester Bellio back then that the employees may use, again, the operative term may, because they cannot be required to use their leave credits if they do not want to. Okay? Again, as a better alternative to outright termination, as I have mentioned earlier, flexible work arrangements were encouraged. In addition to this, it was also clarified through this advisory that all of those working outside the National Capital Region should be allowed entry into the city or into Metro Manila as long as they present proof of employment and or proof of residency. So going to the next advisory, Labor Advisory number 12, in relation to Department Order 209, which I will be discussing in more detail in a bit, talks about CAMP. If you guys can remember, CAMP stands for COVID-19 Adjustment Measures Program. So this is the social amelioration program that was launched so as to help those who were not getting paid because of the pandemic. There are certain guidelines on how an employee may receive this 5,000 peso social amelioration from the government. Again, I will be discussing this in more detail in a bit. Labor Advisory 12A is just a clarification on the documents that are needed for the CAMP application. So this should include payroll documents showing that the applicant is included in the company's payroll for the previous month. Labor Advisory number 13, 15, and two other advisories speak of guidelines on the payment of wages for regular holidays, which were covered during the pandemic or from March up to July. What's special about this though is that for April 9, employees are not getting 100% holiday premium only. As April 9, as two holidays fall on April 9, that's the Araw ng Kagitingan and Holy Thursday, employees who reported for work will be receiving 200% additional holiday premium. Okay. Labor Advisory 13A is a way of the Department of Labor and Employment to help out the employers. How did they do this? They allow the deferment of payment of the holiday pay until such time that the employer has resumed its operations or when there's normal operations of the establishment already. Moreover, for establishments that have totally closed or ceased operations, they are exempted. They were exempted from paying out the holiday pay for the April 2020 holidays. Proud to say though that our performance did have to do this. Next, Labor Advisory number 14, helpful for the employers because this added a 1-month period for the probationary period for employees. As you may already know, Employers have a maximum of 6 months to decide whether or not an employee is qualified or has met the expectations for regularization. As a lot of employees were not able to report for work during the ECQ or during the quarantine period, and the employer didn't have an opportunity to assess the performance of the said employees, the Department of Labor and Employment saw it fit for the 1 month period to be excluded in the 6 month probationary period to determine whether or not an employee should be considered a regular employee already. Noteworthy is the fact, though, that other than for probationary period, no other type of period has been mentioned. So this does not include floating status period. As mentioned earlier, a lot of advisories were issued with regard to payment of wages for the holidays during the quarantine. So the next one that we have is the May 1 holiday, the Labor Day holiday, whereby Labor Advisory number 15 also stated, apart from the guidelines on the payment, how much should be added, it also stated that the employers are allowed again to defer the payment of the said holiday pay, and for those that have totally closed or ceased operations, they were exempted from paying out this holiday pay. Labor Advisory number 16 allowed a period within which the employers or the foreign employees may file their applications and renewals for alien employment permits and private employment agency licenses until after the quarantine period. So they still have 45 working days after the quarantine period is listed for filing of these extensions or applications. Labor Advisory number 17 provides for minimum health standards in compliance with the DTI-DOLE interim guidelines on resumption of work. So this would include work from home, which is now the new norm. This would include having to adjust the wages and benefits that are received by the employees for a maximum period of 6 months, which may later on be extended, provided that both the employers and the employee groups agree voluntarily and in writing as to the tenets of the said agreement. And again, DOLE cannot overemphasize on the fact that it is recommending and encouraging alternative work schemes to prevent closure of the business or the termination of a lot of employees. The minimum health standards, as I mentioned earlier, will further on be discussed in a bit. Labor Advisory 17A just shared an RKF Form 5. This is an establishment report that is being used for flexible work arrangements, alternative work schemes, temporary closure, retrenchment or reduction of workforce, or permanent closure. Whenever any of this instance occurs, there is a requirement that the employers have to submit and report the same to the Department of Labor and Employment. So what do we understand about retrenchment? Because we have discussed earlier what flexible work arrangements or AWS, alternative work schemes, are. And we know what temporary closure is. Retrenchment, on the other hand, is something that is not quite usually happening. So retrenchment happens when when a company expects losses. And why is retrenchment being highlighted during this quarantine? Because a lot of businesses are expecting losses. So in case it has to cut down on workforce, most one of the most logical authorized course that may be used by an employer would be retrenchment. Sad fact though is that as compared to redundancy, for retrenchment, an employee would only receive 1 month's pay or at least 1/2 month's pay for every year of service, a fraction of 6 months of which is considered as 1 year. Next. So labor advisory number 18 is the guidelines on the cost of COVID-19 prevention and control measures. Basically, it says that all measures to curb the effects of COVID-19 is for the account of the employer. So this would include testing kits, disinfection facilities, PPE signages, even training, and other measures that the company would want to implement so as to comply with the minimum health standards as mandated by the government. Labor Advisory number 20, as mentioned earlier, is one of those whereby DOLE provided guidelines on the release of holiday pay for Idul Fitr. So, same as the previous holidays, there is deferment of payment that's allowed as well as exemption. Labor Advisory number 22, same as the previous ones, but this time for Independence Day. Now we go to the department orders. As mentioned earlier, Department Order number 209 talks about the COVID-19 amelioration program of the Department of Labor and Employment. So what exactly is CAMP? CAMP is a program of the government whereby they would provide 5,000 pesos one-time assistance to employees whose employers have implemented flexible work arrangements or alternative work arrangements and they are affected due to suspension of work or because they have no leave credits anymore and they are not getting paid. So applicants from large companies unfortunately weren't prioritized. So the government gave out the assistance, the social assistance, to those from small and medium enterprises. DOLE has already announced that as of May, they have stopped accepting applications for CAMP. And notices of approval or denial have been relayed to the employers for dissemination to the employees. Department Order number 210 is about TUPAD. This is Tulong Paghanap Buhay sa Ating Displaced or Disadvantaged Workers Program. Barangay Ko, Buhay Ko, TUPAD, BKK, Disinfecting Sanitation Project. So this is a flagship program of DOLE to provide assistance to those who were displaced or unemployed, like those who were cleaning the streets. So this was a way of DOLE to help out. Department Order number 213 talks about the suspension of the running of the prescriptive period for filing of actions, claims, petitions, complaints, and other proceedings with the Department of Labor and Employment. So from March 16 until the end of the quarantine, the said prescriptive periods are suspended. So let's say you have a motion to you have an appeal that you should be filing already or a motion for reconsideration. So as of now, the said period, let's say you only have 10 days, that has been suspended. Okay? Now we talk about the DTI and DOLE interim guidelines. What exactly are these? These are the minimum health standards which employers are required to comply with when they resume operation. So this should already be in place. What are these? So the company should provide the necessary company policies for the prevention and control of COVID-19, to provide resources and materials needed to keep the workers healthy, and to provide a safe workplace. So this includes personal protective equipment, provide masks, soap, sanitizers, appropriate PPE, taking of temperature. So that's included in designation of a safety officer, and monitoring the said measures, disinfecting the premises every 2 hours, accomplishing the health declaration form. So this has been provided in the DTI DOLE interim guidelines as well. Focus on physical distancing. So we need to provide adequate physical distance between employee workstations. So like for teleperformance, we're doing it one station apart. And then even in our pantry, it's at least one person per table, at most one person per table, and we have barriers as well. For our hallways, we have arrows whereby it's just going to be either one way or two way. So those are included in the interim guidelines. We need to discourage communal eating and face-to-face meetings. Workplace layout to encourage unidirectional movement. And then the government, of course, expects the private sector employers to provide COVID-19 testing. If there is a need, self-performance through our health provider endorses employees to testing centers. And then we have protocols in place should there be employees who are symptomatic or positive. We also have provided shuttle services since like now for MECQ, there is no public transportation. Although again, proud to say that even when it was already GCQ in Metro Manila or in other parts of the country, the performance still provided shuttle services to its employees. And then we also have a dedicated COVID-19 hotline and call center for employees to report if symptomatic, and daily monitoring scheme of suspect conditions. We also provide the report both to the LGU or the local government unit and the DOLE regional office for all the illnesses that are related to COVID-19. Okay, so as you can see here at the right side, this is a sample of a health declaration form. We also have that. We have that in the office, the online version. But I think you are familiar with this because like everywhere you go now, restaurants, even Jollibee and some malls, you have to fill this out before you're allowed entry. So it is because this is already being required by the government. Next, very important to all of us, I guess, the Telecommuting Act. This is Republic Act number 11165. In case you're wondering, this has been approved since December 20th, 2018. However, telecommuting at the time wasn't really a necessity. Telecommuting or working from home wasn't as much of a necessity as it is right now. So for telecommuting, under the Telecommuting Act, employers may offer work from home or a telecommuting program to its employees on a voluntary basis. So what if an employee says, I don't want to do work from home? Then I guess the company has no choice but to have him work on site. But what if the employee says, there's imminent danger, I don't want to risk my life? Then the company has no choice at this point, especially during the MECQ, but to wait it out. Going back to telecommuting, The terms and conditions of the agreement between the employer and the employees for telecommuting should not be less than the minimum labor standards set by law. In fact, it should not be less than what the employee is receiving as if he's working on site. Okay? So the terms and conditions of the said agreement should be via a written document. Employees who are on telecommuting should be treated equally as with those who are working on site, such that the employer should take measures to prevent the said employees from being isolated, since you don't get to talk to your office mates all the time. And the employer should make sure that data of the client is protected. So one possible way would be to disable the USB. So as to prevent employees from copying the information, while others even have webcams installed. Okay. The Department of Labor and Employment, supporting Republic Act 11165, issued the implementing rules and regulations for the Telecommuting Act. So there should be, again, an agreement between the parties, the employer and the employees, as to the eligibility, the code of conduct that should be followed, appropriate alternative workplaces, the use and cost of the equipment, the work days and hours, because they might have a different work schedule as compared to when they were reporting on site, conditions of employment, compensation, benefits, particularly those unique to telecommuting employees. So this may include internet allowance, if there is, non-diminution of benefits, occupational safety and health, observance of data privacy policy, this is very important, dispute settlement, and termination or change of work arrangement. Because as mentioned earlier, telecommuting is always voluntary. If a person doesn't feel comfortable anymore, then the employee should be given the chance to report back on site. The employer shall notify the Department of Labor and Employment on the adoption of the telecommuting work arrangement or the work at home arrangement. So this is included in the RKF that was presented earlier. So where should the reporting be done? Now it's being done online via the regional or the provincial office of the Department of Labor and Employment covering the business unit. Please take note that satellite offices don't file there because I don't think that it's going to be considered valid. Okay, so just a few more. Just want to share with you that there are ongoing inspections. Teleperformance has been through about 10 inspections already or more as regards the compliance with the minimum health standards as mandated under the DTI and DOLE interim guidelines for resumption of work. So this is a sample of an inspection report. As you can see, the Department of Labor and Employment will look for signages on COVID safety measures posted in the premises, wearing of face masks at all times. I'm going through it one by one so that you may be guided because this is very important. Should you fail in the inspection, there is a possibility that the IATF will conduct an inspection on your premises in which may result to closure of your business. Daily accomplishment of the health and symptoms questionnaire or the health declaration form. Accomplished health symptoms questionnaire submitted to the human resources or clinic personnel. Temperatures checked for both workers and visitors. Spraying of alcohol, sanitizers on both hands. Disinfectant foot baths at the entrance. Isolation areas. This should be well ventilated, frequently disinfected, wash personnel to handle COVID-19 symptomatic workers, appropriate medical grade PPE for OSH personnel provided, contact numbers of nearest DOH facility or PERS posted, protocols for referral of transporting workers with COVID-19 symptoms established. So believe me, they are serious about this checklist. They went through the different parts of the site to verify if this is being complied with. Equipment or vehicle entering the premises should be disinfected. In fact, every time the vehicle is used, it should be disinfected. Social or physical distancing of at least 1 meter. Company safety and health program in compliance to the interim guidelines formulated. We had to present our policies on this one, even our business continuity measures. Company commitment to comply with OSH requirements. This is just a certification, so you can draft it. Signages on COVID safety measures. Common areas and frequently handled objects disinfected. So this would be your elevators, your doors, and then frequent hand washing, clean water and soap in all washrooms and toilets, sanitizers in all areas where workers pass, physical distancing, again, strategic work shift implemented, like for teleperformance, since it's a call center, we're operating 24/7. So we had to submit our workforce plan for the month so that they know how many are on shift at a certain hour. So why did they ask for this? Because they had to make sure that physical distancing may still be observed or complied with given the attendance. Signages for one-way direction in walkways established. So that was what I was referring to earlier when I said that now we have arrows in the office showing the direction where the employees are supposed to walk. Directional signages posted for one-way out. Transparent barriers between office tables and open workspaces provided. Use of shared tools and equipment done one at a time. Use of phones, email, and other virtual platforms for office work and meetings encouraged. During the inspection of the Department of Labor and Employment in our Davao site, we had to cover the keyboard with, I guess that was plastic. I don't know what it's called, but it's one of those that they required. And then disinfection done every after use of the tools, social distancing when eating, yada yada. So one of the things that may not be found in the interim guidelines, but is included in the checklist, is the number of DOLE. The hotline of DOLE should be posted in the office. So just a piece of advice, just in case DOLE would inspect your premises, it should be there. So this is a sample of the RKS form. Okay, so actually that is the last, but as a bonus for everyone, I will just give you or discuss with you a few points from the supplemental guidelines that were released yesterday. Just this is really fresh. It was just released yesterday. The Department of Labor and Employment Secretary Sylvester Bello III and DTI Secretary Ramon Lopez issued Joint Memorandum Circular 20-04 Series of 2020, or the DTI and DOLE Supplemental Guidelines on Workplace Prevention and Control of COVID-19. So the salient points of the said issuance are: referral of symptomatic individuals to a quarantine facility as provided under the DOH interim guidelines is reiterated. Designated smoking areas in the workplaces shall be provided with additional booths, subject to the applicable requirements and standards under Republic Act 9211. So smoking in a public area with more than one person in without booth won't be allowed anymore. Masks, this is very important, very new. We've heard about this in like the different LGUs, but now we have a pronouncement from the Department of Labor and Employment. Masks and face shields operative word "and" should always be worn together at the workplace. Masks with vents and visor type face shields are prohibited. Face shields should cover the whole face and may be removed according to the demands of the work or when the occupational safety and health of the employee so require. Employers classified as large and medium-sized private establishments are enjoined to provide shuttle services to their employees. Advocacy awareness raising programs is mandated, meaning you have to train your workforce. Most at-risk populations, so these are the compromised. You have your senior citizens, pregnant women, individuals with underlying health conditions, shall continue to observe work from home arrangements. When needed to occasionally report to work, they may be allowed to, provided a certificate of fit to work is secured. The health declaration form shall be handled and processed in accordance with the Data Privacy Act. There's a provision here that it should be discarded after 30 days. Okay. Employers shall direct symptomatic individuals to appropriate health system entry points, such as the primary care facility for the barangays or a telehealth consultation. Display of signages as to proper hand washing. I think all of us now, we have this. Minimum public health standards should be enforced even in the shuttle services. Example, the use of face shields and face masks. Observance of physical distancing and frequent disinfection. The employees inside the vehicle should be required to avoid talking with each other. So I guess we heard about the directive for the trains, like no talking, no talking, no taking of phone calls, no eating, no removing the mask. Now, this is also being required for the shuttle services, plus the signage of the prohibition. The safety officer, which refers to an employee or officer of the company trained by the Department of Labor and tasked by the employer to implement an occupational safety and health program and ensure that it is in accordance with the provisions of OSH standards, will determine the maximum number of employees allowed to stay at any given time in areas where they usually converge during breaks. There should be adequate ventilation inside the workplace. For establishments with multiple tenants, they're encouraged to designate an isolation area of one room for every 20 employees. And then what else? Company protocols for transporting, mentioned earlier, should be in place. As to testing of symptomatic and close contacts, all employees experiencing symptoms of COVID-19 and those who are close contacts must undergo RT-PCR testing. Employers shall inform the LGUs having jurisdiction over the workplace and the respective residents of the symptomatic employees and close contacts before testing for monitoring purposes. For those of you who have offices located in Taguig, the LGU of Taguig is really very helpful. In case you do rapid testing, you may coordinate with them because they have a program where you can apply for swab testing to be done free by the local government unit there. And then if one confirmed case of COVID-19 is detected in the workplace, this is very important. This is the last. The facility shall be disinfected with an appropriate disinfectant solution. The building must be locked down for 24 hours prior to disinfection to lessen transmission to sanitation personnel. During the disinfection process, all doors and windows should be open. Employer shall ensure that the temporary closure of the establishment for disinfection purposes be done in accordance with the National Task Force Against COVID-19 Memorandum Circular Number 2 dated June 15, 2020. So there. Okay.
Ayan. Ayan. So, ang dami nating mga questions right now na pumasok
Sorry.
actually. Oo.
I didn't
Oo,
Sure.
madaming question. So, iisa-isahin lang natin kasi yung iba mga nasa itaas pa. Okay. So, first question po natin is from Miss Lynn Mendoza. Flexible work arrangement or alternative work systems, labor advisory number 17A. Does this include work from home? Kailangan bang mag-submit ng report to DOLE?
Okay. So while it is not included specifically in 17A, it is included in the Telecommuting Act, and there is a repertorial requirement for work from home.
Okay, so kailangan po mag-submit. Yan. Okay, tapos next question po. So Miss Lynn, I hope that answers your question. Kailangan pa rin po mag-submit ng report. And then our next question is again from Miss Lynn, what does it mean that employees should shoulder testing kits? Is it once the employee suspected for COVID, or is this about whenever employer wants to ensure that all are COVID free, then they need to pay for it?
Okay. So if it is employer who would want the testing to be done, then it should cover the cost.
Okay, so
If the
employer.
yes, employer.
Oo. So
Usually
kung
it's not
mm.
through the health insurance, like if you have MaxiCare or Intel, the others, Value Care, whatever.
Oo.
Yeah.
Okay, so if ever meron silang kung meron kayong mga HMO provider, please check with them if this is covered by them, or if there is a way for them to help you get tested nang hindi ganun kamahal yung babayaran nyo. Kasi I don't think lahat ng HMO providers are able to shoulder this one. This being a unique situation, and some HMO providers have a clause against pandemic. So if ever, check with your HMO provider if they will shoulder this. If not, if they can help you or direct you to someone who can do RPT PCR testing. Ayan po. Take note po, ang RPT PCR testing ang ating pong gold standard. We're trying to shy away from recommending rapid testing because it provides false positive. So mas maganda yung RPT PCR testing po. Okay? And then next question po. Kay Miss Ana pala ito. Ang next question po natin ay, what are the trainings needed in order to be a safety officer? Meron daw po bang mga trainings na kailangan?
Yes, certifications are required for a safety officer. So
Okay,
kailangan
so kailangan, oo. Yes, kailangan niyo po magpa-certify. If hindi po kayo sigurado kung sino po yung pwede mag-certify, I believe DOLE has a list of accredited centers. You can check with them kung saan po kayo po pwedeng magpa-certify. Tapos ano po yan, nire-renew po yan, hindi po yan forever. So kailangan niyo po mag-take pa ng additional trainings later on para ma-ensure na yung certification niyo po ay valid pa din. Okay? If the company implemented an alternative working system, if an employee had no work schedule the day before the regular holiday, does this mean he is not entitled for a holiday pay? So feeling ko nakaano sila, alternate work schedule sila.
So like if an employee had no work schedule considered without say the day before the regular holiday, if he has no, when was his last schedule? If he worked on the last day he was supposed to work talaga, then he should be entitled to holiday pay. So even if the date right before the holiday is unworked, but it is because he really had no work at that time, then it will not be taken against him.
Yes. So check nyo po kung kailan, ang magiging basis nyo po, ang magiging reference nyo is kung kailan yung huling araw talaga ng schedule niya. Yun. Okay po. Next question po. I hope that answers your question, Miss Nora. Next question po natin, can the employee from Miss Yvonne, can the employee request for a work from home arrangement temporarily due to the COVID break in his or her institution? Hospital setting daw po sila.
Well, for the hospital, I think for admin or the back office, it shouldn't be an issue. But those which are in relation to the actual operations of the hospital, I think that's going to be hard to do.
Okay, yun po. Are the employees allowed to deduct their employee salary without a CBA?
Okay. As regards deductions, the labor code is very specific with regard to deductions. So government mandated only, or those allowed by the CBA, or those with the consent of the employee. Other than that, no other deductions will be allowed. So
Ayan
when
po.
we say with the consent of the employees, that would include your salary loans, loans with the company, or let's say there is a mandate or a decision from the court that you should be paying support and it's given directly to the recipient, so that's allowed.
Okay. What if we are done with Bosch? Will there be any new OSH training relative to the new normal safety standards? Meron daw po bang bagong training or wala naman na?
None that we have been apprised of recently.
Okay, so wala pa po mga kapatid. From MJ Seled, is indefinite forced leave allowed during these times? Should be rotation, right?
When we say indefinite forced leave, the answer is no, it's not allowed. It would only be for a maximum period of 6 months. Should be rotation, right? Well, it is management prerogative. Again, there are different alternative work arrangements that are being encouraged by the Department of Labor so as not to affect everyone. So there could be a rotation, that is one, or if the company cannot bring you back after 6 months of being on forced leave, then you should either be redundated or retrenched.
Okay. So when we say indefinite forced leave, this can also refer to the floating status. Is that correct?
Yeah, furlough,
Okay. So
yeah.
6 months lang siya talaga.
Maximum yan.
Maximum. Okay. So if hindi siya mapabalik within 6 months, then there should be a separation pay provided to the employee.
Correct.
Okay. Are government employees, do government employees need to spend personally for the testing kits?
Ah, medyo wala naman po kasing binigay na difference, si
Oo.
guideline as regards spending for the test. Although the LGUs are giving free naman.
Mm-mm. Okay. So yun po. So better check na lang po with your with your department para malaman nyo if kailangan nyo ba mag-spend or whatnot. Next question po. I was notified March 27 that I will be on TLO effective April 27. August 3, I received a notification that I will be redundant effective September 3. My employer stated that the 30 days notice of redundancy from August 3 to September 3 will not be paid since I am on TLO. Is this correct? Thanks in advance.
Okay. What the company should have sana is, since hindi naman po kayo, you're on temporary layoff naman talaga, dapat inano lang nila ng August 3. Although kasi, required yun eh. Required na notice period, you are paid eh. So, they should have paid you.
Okay, so i-check nyo po. So Romney, better check with your HR on how this should be handled. Okay, you can also, on DOLE po ay nagpo-provide din po, meron din po silang hotline where you can check with them the best way to handle this. Okay, and then they can also serve as an arbiter if ever meron kayong, if gusto niyo makaharap at maging maayos yung usapan. From back offices for hospital setting, are they eligible for hazard pay?
Hazard pay is not really a requirement. It is management prerogative to provide hazard pay. There's a pronouncement though from the president recently as to hazard pay for nurses.
So nurses, not necessarily yung mga, let's say, admin staff, admin people.
Yes.
Okay. Ano ko lang highlight ko rin po dun sa iba pong mga nanonood right now. Hazard pay is not required if you're not in the hospital setting. So if you're a private institution, private organization, tas sinabihan kayo ng employers nyo na kailangan nyo nang pumasok, hindi po sila required na bayaran kayo ng hazard pay. Okay po? So, yun. Mask with vent is prohibited. What about mask with vent but will filter inserts?
I don't think I'm in a position to answer that.
Actually, wala pong binabanggit si DOLE tungkol dito sa kung kailangan ba may vent or kung ano pa man. Pero, ang nire-recommend po ni DOH ay yung walang vents. Okay, yung mask lang siya talaga kasi yung vents po pwedeng pumasok pa din doon yung mga droplets. So, ang nire-recommend nila is yung mask lang talaga, wala pong kasamang vents. Okay. Hindi po talaga kami updated sa approach kung ano po ito. Pwede ba yung vice ganda mask or not allowed? So, hindi ko sure, hindi ako updated kung ano yung tsura ng vice ganda mask. But ang ninaano po kasi nila is yung usual na mask na ginagamit sa mga hospitals, yung kulay blue na may ano lang, may pangsukbit lang sa tenga. Pwede na po 'yon. Cloth mask hindi masyadong nire-recommend kasi po pwedeng kumapit dun sa mask nyo mismo yung virus. So, mas maganda yung disposable na mask kasi yun, once na magamit nyo po, pwede nyo na kagad siya itapon. Yung cloth kasi, may possibility na if you touch it, or if for example, hindi nyo kagad nalaban, pumasok kayo sa bahay, hinawakan ng iba, pwede siyang mag-transmit. So, mas maganda pa rin po yung mask na ginagamit sa mga hospital, yung naka-cover lang. Okay, and then next question po. Napasobra ako ng scroll. If an employee cannot report back to work due to transport issue, is it correct that we apply for redundancy?
Okay. So, redundancy is an authorized cost provided by the labor code. Very specific po tayo. When it comes to redundancy, it's because the position has become superfluous or hindi na kasi needed si position. So, it is an employer-initiated action whereby the employer is telling you, hindi na kita pwedeng pagtrabahuhin because the position, there is no more need for you. So, yung tanong po natin, if it is the employee himself who cannot report back, then you cannot apply for redundancy in its strictest sense.
Yes. Employer po ang nag-i-initiate at nagde-declare na kung ang isang position ay redundant. Hindi po pwedeng mag-request si employee na i-declare siya as redundant. Okay? Now, employers, be very, very careful din naman po sa kung ano ang dinideclare nyong redundant. Kasi once you declare a position redundant, hindi kayo po pwedeng mag-hire for a specific period of time for the same position. Okay?
Correct.
So, ingat po tayo dyan. Okay.
And also, to support it, sorry Ron, to support it also, that's why there is a requirement for 30-day prior notice before the effective date for redundancy or any other authorized cause, because si employer ang nagsasabi sa'yo na mawawalan ka na ng work. So at least you have 30 days to start looking for another job.
Mm-hmm.
So there.
Correct. Yun. Okay. Next po natin, from Miss Lynn again, you've mentioned that employers should coordinate with LGU once employees are suspected to have COVID. However, if the company is work from home since quarantine was implemented, should the employer still be doing the reporting to the LGU or po pwedeng si employee na ang mag-report kay LGU na siya ay COVID suspected or positive?
Okay, so there would be two types of reports. Regardless of the where the employee is holding office, whether work from home or working on site, there is a requirement from the LGU that all cases should be reported to them. So that includes those in work from home arrangements. Now, as for the employee, he is also required to report to his local government, like the barangay, that he is positive. So
Ayan.
the report in the office, at least prior to the supplemental guidelines, is the LGU covering the office, not the residence of the employee.
Okay po. So yun. So next po natin is a company nurse without BOSH or COSH can be designated a safety officer. Alam ko po ay hindi. Tama po ba, attorney? Hindi po pwede
Yes,
na i-consider
tama.
na ano, oo, kailangan certified po
Yes
sila.
po.
At saka may levels po ito. So hindi po puwedeng basta-basta i-a-assign na lang kung sino yung or magde-designate na lang na kung sino ang safety officer. They have to be certified para po sila maging safety officer. Meron silang specific na training na kailangan daanan at depende po sa level, meron po silang number of hours na required silang mag-undergo ng training for that. Okay? Our company is on temporary closure. If our company decides to reopen, let's say in 2 months, then after the 2 months, the company decides to temporarily close again, is the time period of temporary closure refreshed or reset?
It's three
So,
steps.
oo. It's reset ano? Oo. So,
Yes.
back to zero kayo. So, kung nag-temporary closure kayo dati, let's say for 2 months, nag-open kayo, and then nag-temporary closure ulit kayo, ang bilang niyo ulit is kung kailan nag-start yung second na temporary closure niyo.
It's not cumulative.
Oo, it's not cumulative po. Is the additional 1 month of probation required?
Nope. It is not really required. Let's say during the quarantine period, the employee nakakapag-work naman siya. Let's say work from home. And there is a way for the employer to measure um, performance, then there is no requirement to use the 1 month period.
Okay. So i-clear lang natin 'yun, ulitin ko lang, kahit na 'pag naka-work from home kayo, at kayo po ay productive, wala pong naging cessation sa inyong trabaho, sa sweldo at kung ano pa man, dire-diretso po ang bilang ng probationary period niyo, okay? Nangyayari lang po yung pagde-delay or pagmo-move ng end ng probationary period 'pag nagkaroon po ng temporary closure si company. Other than that, dire-diretso po ang bilang. Okay po. And then next question po, what if maraming nag-positive sa rapid test? Need po ba i-shutdown ang company?
Okay. So rapid test isn't really the basis. It's the swab test. So if the company has conducted rapid test, there is a need for confirmatory test via swab. If doon madaming nag-positive, then there will be a need to close the office for disinfection.
Okay. So hindi po rapid test ang basis natin. Like what I've mentioned earlier, ang atin pong gold standard ay ang RPT, PCR, or ito po yung tinatawag natin na swab test. Mas reliable po ang results ng swab test kaysa po sa rapid test kasi ang rapid test po ay pwede siyang mag-false positive. Okay. How about extra expense for the employee for work from home arrangement? Employee po ba nagsho-shoulder nun or ang employer? For extra charges like internet and electricity, can we reimburse? Actually, this is a very, very good question. And in the previous company that I've worked with, this is one of the things that most of the employees are asking about. Ano pong masasabi niyo,
Very
attorney?
controversial yan. Well, there is no requirement in the Telecommuting Act specific to this one, the additional expenses, except for the cost of the equipment na sinabi naman, it should be the employer. Now, it all depends on the arrangement between the employer and the employee. That's why it's also written in the Telecommuting Act that the provisions should be in a written document to make sure that both parties are protected. Any other additional benefits, kaya merong nakalagay doon na any other additional benefits should be there also. Again, unfortunately, it is not a requirement for the employers to do that. At present, though, a lot of companies are offering or giving additional allowances.
Yes.
Average of 1.5 for internet and electricity.
Yes, actually, oo. Usual practice ngayon, especially when it comes to BPO companies, is to provide for internet connection. Average of 1.5
Yeah.
nga. Oo.
Ang
So,
problema lang, others naman sinasabi, then we shouldn't be giving you your transportation allowance because you're not going to the office. So, there.
yun lang. Okay. But for those HR na who would want to avoid these gray areas, make sure lang na when you roll out your policies, your procedures, you take into consideration these things. If you don't have a business continuity plan yet, please make sure that you have a business continuity plan, or at least, let's say, for your allowances, if you have a written process for that, or written policy for that, include there what happens if the employee works from home, especially in the new normal. When all of this is through, I think most of the employers are willing to take into consideration working from home. So you need to have a policy that will cover those things. What about Labor Advisory 14-A? Ano po ba yung
Yes,
Labor Advisory 14-A?
tingnan natin ha. I'll check. Give me one sec. Ron,
Sige lang.
can you go to the next one?
Okay, so balikan namin ikaw, Miss Lalaine. Okay? Habang ino-open natin yung Labor Advisory 14-A. Since nasa hospital, okay, I think nasagot na to kanina. So if you are if you're a frontliner, if you're part of the operations in a hospital setting, you can get hazard pay. But if you're part of the back office, wala po yung hazard pay. Okay? So yun po. For those asking, si Attorney Mel po ay isa pong legit na attorney. Okay? Legit na attorney po siya. May nag-comment kasi sana legit na attorney na lang kinuha niyo as speaker. Legit na
Nahiya
attorney
ako. Oh my gosh, nahiya ako.
ako na po ang nagsasabi sa kanya. Legit po siya. Sure kami na pumasa po siya ng board. At siya po ang nag-handle ng legal and compliance for teleperformance. She's the head of legal and compliance for teleperformance. I don't think she would be handling that position if she doesn't have the right credentials. Okay. So habang hinahanap po natin ng Labor Advisory 14-A, we are in quarantine. You have it na. Okay, sige po. Display lang natin para makita nila.
Share screen ka na lang. Or
Sige po.
bigay ko na lang yung summary. Sinasabi lang sa 14-A that for the 6-month period, yung time na naka-enhance or general community quarantine sa establishment, tapos nag-close siya, or hindi required si employee to work, hindi siya kasama sa 6-month period. Yun yung sinasabi ni 14A. Ang sinasabi natin for 14 is yung 1 month, continued operations, yung si company.
Oo. So pag continued operations po kayo, naka-work from home, continuous din po yung probationary period nyo. Hindi nyo, wala kayong basis para i-extend yung probationary period kasi considered as dire-diretso pa rin naman yung work nyo.
Correct.
Okay. We are in quarantine period. How are we going to regularize employees if the quarantine period has been extended? What would be the approach? Lalo na ngayon na from MECQ, naging MGCQ, tapos biglang bumalik ng MECQ.
So our basis should always be whether or not we are able to assess or measure the performance of the employee. So yun po palagi. The best approach would be easy kasi if the person is working from home. Kasi you have basis like you have productivity reports, you have temp checks, you can do all of those. Now, what if the company, as mentioned, as was asked earlier about 14A, if the company temporarily nag-close, then definitely wala, diba? Wala kang way to regularize because you have no basis. Wala rin namang work so wala talagang ma-regularize.
Okay? So po pwede nyo po siyang i-extend kasi wala pa kayong basis. Nag-stop yung operations temporarily. So during that time, hindi siya productive. Wala kayong pagkukunan ng proof nyo na itong employee na to is qualified nga for the regular position. So yun yung rationale or principle behind it.
If you're getting worried about whether the company nag-temporary close and then feeling nyo ma-regularize by default si employee, please don't get worried about that because if your business temporarily shuts down or closes, you are required to report this to DOLE. So you have the protection na, no, I reported it. So it shouldn't be counted against me.
Oo. So very very important po yung pagre-report sa DOLE para kasi namo-monitor din nila in case na merong magsampa ng kaso, meron kayong proof na itong mga temporary stoppage of work ay meron po kayo na i-file niyo po ito kay DOLE at meron kayong documentation for this. It's very, very important. Okay? What if you did not apply for an HMO provider? If you do not have HMO po or you do not have the budget for an HMO, PhilHealth actually acts like an HMO. Kaya nga mapapansin nyo, kahit na may HMO kayo, ang unang-unang dinideduct is yung sa PhilHealth bago i-apply yung HMO coverage. So PhilHealth also acts as an HMO. It's not as comprehensive as an HMO, but companies are not required to ask for an HMO, to provide an HMO coverage for their employees. Hindi po kayo required. PhilHealth should be enough kasi meron din naman po silang mga packages for testing. Meron din po silang mga packages if ever you do turn out to be COVID positive.
Gaberons, I'm nostalgic. I can remember your government benefits days.
Oo nga. Is it valid po that monthly rate should be paid as daily rate during pandemic kahit regular work schedule na po?
Okay. Remember when I discussed earlier about the employer and the employee now being allowed to talk about and consider new salary rates or benefits at least for the next 6 months. So, pwede po siyang makover nito. Pero dapat may agreement between the parties. Kung wala
Yes
pong
po.
agreement, there is no way for this to happen or be validly implemented.
Okay. So, ano po yan ha, kailangan both parties po ang nag-agree. Hindi po pwedeng basta-basta na lang siya i-implement ni employer. Dapat na-discuss po yan, and especially in this situation, there should be an open discussion between employers and employees para hindi po tayo nagkakaroon ng problema. Is there a sanction for LGUs and GAs for non-reporting of employees infected with COVID or suspected of COVID? May sanction po ba pag hindi ni-report?
Sa LGUs, hindi ko po alam ang sanction sa kanila. But for the private establishment, yes, there is a penalty. In fact, it includes closure of establishment for failure to report not only the positive cases, but even those na symptomatic.
Okay, let me just repeat that kasi marami pong mga employers, ang feeling ko nai-skipan tong part na to. So if you have symptomatic employees, this has to be reported. Okay, it's very, very important. Now, I do think that LGUs are also sanctioned kasi I think si DOH naglabas din sila ng guidelines na po pwedeng ma-penalize yung hindi pagre-report ng COVID-infected individuals. So make sure po na reported nyo yan. Napaka-importante po nito kasi kailangan din po ito ng DOH para na monitor yung cases, and at the same time para din po maprotektahan yung organization or yung local government unit if ever they have cases. So dapat po nire-report po ito. Private organizations, definitely meron po kayong sanction if you do not report suspected or COVID positive individuals. LGUs, most likely po meron din po yan, but you'll have to check with your LGU, with the LGU head itself kung meron po, or with DOH, pwede nyo po i-check sa kanila. Okay? If separate buildings pero magkatabi lang, like one building away, both ba ila-lockdown for disinfecting?
No po. Kung nasan lang po yung only where the employee na nag-positive. Yung mga
doon lang po sa
kung isang building yon, pero one floor lang naman siya, there's no reason for the whole building to shut down. To be shut
kung
down.
saan lang po siya nagpunta or kung saan lang po siya nakastay. Okay? So kahit na magkatabing building, kung hindi naman siya pumunta doon sa kabilang building, wala naman pong reason para i-lockdown for disinfect. Okay? So for manpower services, does the client or principal required to shoulder yung cost ng PPEs for COVID-19 prevention? Under agency yung mga empleyado, sino po ba dapat ang sumagot nun? Si agency or si principal?
It depends on the agreement between the principal and the vendor. Like for us, we cover it. Pero kasi pwedeng i-require si vendor na no, since it's a part of your job, then make sure na yung mga empleyado mo are equipped. So that could be a defense that may be used by the principal.
Okay, so kung wala po kayong existing clause for that in your agreement with the provider, talk to your provider para ma-require po sila na mag-provide ng PPE. Okay? For retrenchment to avoid business losses, management decides to issue a termination letter to employee. Sorry, hindi ko alam po kung anong question, pero usually naman talaga, pag retrenchment to avoid business losses, the management issues the termination letter. But there should also be a notification to DOLE about the retrenchment. So hindi ito po pwedeng immediate, may 30 days pa din po ito kahit na ano to avoid business losses.
So that's part of due process for authorized causes. Both the notification, again, as mentioned by our dear Ron, to both the employee and to the Department of Labor. Kasi po, pag hindi tayo nag-notify or less than 30 days notification, that is considered constructive dismissal.
Okay po. So ingatan po natin yon, yung pagdating po doon sa hindi pag-notify, it could be grounds for constructive dismissal. Just clarification po, what is the difference between forced leave and reduced work days based on the flexible arrangement? So
Okay.
forced leave versus reduced work days.
The reduced work days po, in a week, you may be required to report only, let's say, for 3 days, 4 days, or anything less than your usual work week. For forced leave, the company is telling you from this period, from this date to this date, you really won't go to work.
Dire-diretso yun. Wala kang pasok.
Oh, yes.
Okay. So yun po yung pinagkaiba niya. Yung isa po, dire-diretsong wala kayong pasok. Tapos yung isa naman, bababaan lang yung number of days na nandun kayo or kailangan nyo mag-report for work. Yun po yung pinagkaiba nila.
Yes.
So how about succeeding rapid or swab test? Some checkpoints kasi is requiring rapid test and may expiration ito. Sino po ang dapat mag-shoulder ng test? Ang pinoproblema nila is yung company driver nila.
How about the succeeding? Always the employer, eh. If it's the
So,
employer who is requiring it, it's always the employer who will shoulder it.
Okay, so employer po ang dapat mag-shoulder. Kasi required din siya as part of his work eh. So dapat talaga si employer yung mag-shoulder. Are retrenched probationary employees entitled for separation pay, retrenchment due to business losses? Yes po.
Okay.
So pag meron po kayong sorry. So pag meron po kayong ni-retrench, yaan po kailangan niyo pong bayaran ng separation pay.
And this is equivalent to 1 month pay or 1/2 month pay for every year of service, a fraction of 6 months of which is considered as 1 year.
Do we need to inform LGU whenever we conduct testing?
No
Kailangan
po. No need po. The only report that the LGU would need would be the symptomatic and the positive cases. When I mentioned the gig earlier, maganda lang po kasi yung program nila na if you want to do rapid test, since you can get the results in a few minutes, they can send the team at once na magsaswab naman in case may mag-positive. So on the spot, gagawin din nila si swab testing. So you just have to coordinate with them.
But this is just for Taguig, correct?
Yeah, I'm not sure about the other LGUs.
Okay, so better check with your LGUs. Typically naman, your local government unit will have their own Facebook page. Check nyo na lang doon if they provide those services. So we have a sort of phone-in question. Wait lang. Monthly paid sila. So they are monthly paid and then they temporarily remove Saturday work but they deduct in our salaries unless one has leave credits. Is it legal or fair? Monthly paid sila, tapos biglang instead of being paid for 365 days, meron na ngayon silang deduction for Saturdays kasi hindi na sila, hindi nakakayanin ng company to support yung monthly paid na model. Is that legal or is it fair?
Well, actually, the labor code naman sees 6 days on a work week eh. Pero, if it is already the practice, nag-ripen na siya, diba? Baka ma-diminution yan of salary.
Okay, even if, Even if the reason for the cost cutting is due to pandemic, kaya hindi na nila binabayaran yung Saturday is due to pandemic.
If it's due to the pandemic, again, it should be based on the agreement between the parties. Sa yung sabi natin kanina that there should be an agreement. And then, hindi kasi siya magpo-fall under reduction of work days unless they were really supposed to work 6 days a week before. Kung 6 days a week sila talaga before, tapos ginawang 5 days, then that's an alternative or flexible work arrangement, which is valid. Pero
Okay.
kung hindi, possible yon kung walang agreement between the parties, possible na ma-diminution yun.
Okay. So ang suggestion ko do sa atin pong phone in question, if you are the HR implementing that, please talk to the employees first before you do that implementation. Kasi kung meron namang agreement at nagkakaintindihan naman kayo at this is something na temporary in nature, baka po pwede nyo po siyang i-implement. Pero if you're looking at this as a permanent setup, baka ma-diminution of benefits po kayo. Okay, kasi sa contract po ay nakalagay doon, especially kung monthly paid, sa contract yan nakalagay yan na guaranteed paid sila every single day
Correct.
of the year. Okay? If employee was COVID positive, co-worker, what are the requirements? If employee was to COVID positive co-worker, what are the requirements or responsibilities of the employers? So I think ang ibig niya sabihin, if si employee ay nahawa ng COVID from a co-worker, ano ang responsibilities ng employer?
Okay, so the employer will have to refer the employee to a health facility and to conduct contact tracing. If you are talking about remuneration or payment for damages because of this, wala pong nakalagay sa law natin holding the company accountable if, again, big if, the company was able to comply with the minimum health standards as required or mandated under the interim guidelines provided by DTI and DOLE.
Okay, so basta si company nag-adhere doon, safe po si employer. Okay? Pero syempre, typically naman yung out of the goodness of your heart ng employer, usually sinasagot
Dapat
naman yan.
masagutan. Oo, correct.
Just a clarification, provision of shuttle service to employees is non-mandatory since the word use is enjoined.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I think hindi siya mandatory pero you also have to consider that if we are under MECQ and ECQ, wala
There's
pong
no public
transportation.
transport. Mm-hmm.
Oo, so wala kayong choice kung hindi mag-provide ng shuttle service to the employee para mapapasok sila at mapauwi ng maayos. Okay? So hindi siya required especially kung naka-GCQ or MGCQ, but since it's MECQ and ECQ, if you want your employees to report for work, you might need to provide for shuttle service.
What is being required by the supplemental guidelines as released yesterday would be the no talking, no eating, what else? Wearing of face shields in the shuttle service. Yun mga required po as well as the signages.
Okay. So hindi pwedeng kumain, hindi po pwedeng nag-uusap sa loob ng shuttle service. Tandaan po natin 'yan. Okay, DOLE guideline provides that employees should explore rotational scheme, but the company did not and instead placed on forced leave employees. But how about indefinite 2 or more than 3 months, even more than 6 months, even longer? Is it legal?
Okay, so let's take it one by one. First, there is no requirement for an employer to choose rotational. What's that, Ron? Can you display it again? Rotational. It is management prerogative with regard to the type of alternative work arrangement that it wants to use. However, with regard to placing an employee on furlough or forced leave for more than 6 months, that is already considered as constructive dismissal because the maximum period within which an employee may be placed on floating status or on temporary layoff or forced leave is only 6 months. So anything in excess, should it exceed constructive dismissal.
Okay, so hanggang 6 months lang po tayo. After 6 months po at in-extend pa rin po ito, maaari na po kayong ma-subject or maaari na ma-subject si employer to constructive dismissal. If the company opt to defer holiday pay starting ng pandemic, will they need to retro the holiday pay once the pandemic is over?
Okay.
Yes
For the
po.
payment of holiday pay, as long as the operations of the business resume and go back to normal, kailangan na pong bayaran yun except kung nag-close na si company. This was consistent in 4, 5 labor advisories on holiday pay.
Okay. So pag sinabi po natin nag-close, hindi po temporarily close as in fully close na po yung company at saka lang po sila ma-exempt sa holiday pay. But if nag-resume po kayo ng work, kailangan nyo pong bayaran yan. Okay? So if the employee cannot report back to work due to transport issue, hindi, nasagot na natin ito, sorry po. Okay. For school setting, can employee refuse on-site reporting, citing COVID threat? School setting po.
There is no specification or any qualification done or given by the Department of Labor and Employment in any of its issuances. I am not sure though about SHED or DEC, what? The
DepEd.
Education Department, DepEd, there. Kasi the employee may refuse to report for work if there is an imminent danger. And DOLE, the issuances recognize imminent danger as the standard for both refusal and immunity from administrative sanctions also. So, ito kasing pandemic is considered imminent danger. So, that can be used. But for teachers, the school setting, I think it's better to verify muna. Baka may ni-release si CHED or si DepEd. Sa DOLE, sure ako na pwedeng mag-refuse si employee. Downside is, wala kang sweldo. So, you may be forced to use your leave credit.
Okay po. If refusal to work on site is refusal to work on site a ground for a disciplinary action. Pag kunwari si company nag-adhere naman siya sa lahat ng guidelines ni DOLE, ni IATF, pag tapos nag-refuse pa rin yung employees to report for work, can it be ground for disciplinary action?
Well, if the company has complied with the minimum health standards, tapos, let's say we're not on MECQ whereby walang public transport, then it may be a ground for disciplinary action, lalo na kung hindi mo justify ni employee bakit ayaw niyang bumalik.
Okay.
If that's the case, the employer naman can place you na lang then on forced leave.
Okay. Can a work from home employee without salary given by the
Yeah.
employer in times of pandemic be given assistance by DOLE po? Okay, kung work from home yan without salary, medyo malaking setup. If you're working from home, you should be getting a salary. Okay? If you're working from home and not getting a salary, then there is a problem. Kasi the assumption is that the company is still operational, so it should still be able to give you kung ano man yung dapat na ibigay sa'yo. Kung meron tayong principle ng no work, no pay, meron din tayong principle na if you work, you should get paid. Yes. So, but,
DOLE assistant, pwede na pong online and through phone ngayon. You don't have to go to DOLE.
yes po. Okay. So yun po. Aside from, meron ding mga ano po if ever you have been, if you're unemployed, if you've been redundated, you've been retrenched, meron din po ino-offer si SSS na unemployment benefit. So yun po. If several employees had close contact with COVID patient, can employees undergo rapid test only or is it required to have them undergo PCR test?
Ang close contact po kasi, not automatic na you'll be required to undergo a test. Usually po yan, quarantine muna. And then, if you develop symptoms, that's the only time that you will be required to undergo that testing. Again, rapid test is not a basis for you to be declared as positive. It's always the swab testing.
When should the employer shoulder the test of the employees? Are we required to shoulder the test if it's done voluntarily by the employees?
The pronouncement of the Department of Labor is that the employer shoulders the test, lalo na pag sila yung nag-require. But if it's voluntary on the part of the employee, I believe that the employer cannot be forced to pay for it.
Pay for that. Correct. Do flexible working arrangements, especially forced leave of 1 day per week, included in the 6 months for the probationary period? So
The
1 day per
labor authorities are quiet on this one po. So I think even if you exceed 6 months, it will be allowed. Walang
Okay.
nakalagay na period lang eh.
Oo. So, ano ko lang po, kung kayo po ay pinagfo-force leave ng 1 day per week, dapat po ito ay walang masyadong bearing sa inyong probationary period. Kasi po ito ay isang araw lamang per week, dire-diretso pa rin po yung trabaho nyo. So, wala po dapat itong bearing sa inyong probationary period.
This is considered as reduction of work days.
Okay? For the rotation of work, re-report pa din po ba sa DOLE?
Yes.
Yes po. Oo. Yes po. Re-report nyo pa rin po yan.
Use the establishment report form po, RKS 5, the one I flashed earlier.
Okay. What if after 6 months, retrenchment is not an option for employees? Employer wants to retain them but no market yet or partial closure pa rin. Anong po pwede nilang gawin?
Best advice would be to reinstate the employee via payroll. Hindi na po pwedeng walang sweldo.
Okay. So, kailangan nyo na pong bayaran si empleyado pag lagpas 6 months na po at hindi nyo pa rin po siya, at naka-floating pa rin po siya, paid na po yung magiging status niya. Hindi na po pwedeng i-push natin yung unpaid pa rin siya. There are 2 regular holidays in 1 day last April 9 in our company. Management, that supervisor and up are no longer entitled for holiday payment. How should we go about it? Should we pay plus 1 day considering it's not really a premium payment because diba, if work should be 300%, if unwork should be 200%. Okay, eto po ay more on how you handle yung holidays po. Ang unang question dito is if dati ba meron ba silang kung bayad ba sila dati? Kasi kung matagal na silang binabayaran during holiday pag pumapasok sila, baka this will form part yung sinasabi nga ni Attorney Mel kanina na practice blossoming into a policy. So naging policy na siya. So kailangan po nating tignan yun. By labor code po, sila managers po ay hindi na nakakakuha ng premium pay. Okay?
And supervisors are included as managerial employees.
Yes. So, i-visit din po natin yun. Kasi kung kailangan natin malaman ano ba yung practice before, bago natin i-implement yung bagong practice. Kasi baka po sumabit po kayo maging diminution of benefit. What if we are yet to enroll a safety officer and the DOLE conducted their visit while we are still waiting for the training? Would it be taken as violation against the company? So wala pa silang safety officer. Ngayon pa lang nagte-training at na-visit na sila. Paano daw po kaya yun?
That will be considered as an action item or a violation, but the inspector will give you a certain period to comply with it. What you can do is to submit yung proof na nag-undergo na po ng training, and then after the training, the safety officer will be given a certificate. You are required to submit that as proof of compliance. After that, you will be given a compliance certificate.
Yun po. So pag kayo po ay binisit ni DOLE or nag-audit po sila, hindi naman po kagad-kagad yan na sasabihan kayo na may violation kayo. Usually yung first visit po niyan, sasabihin sa inyo kung ano yung mga kailangan nyong ayusin. So bibigyan kayo ng period na kung kailan nyo aayusin yon. And then, if hindi nyo siya naayos sa period na yun, tsaka pa lang po siya talaga magiging violation. Okay? Regarding probationary period on Labor Advisory number 14, may other guidelines po ba na i-extend ng more than 1 month yung non-inclusion if hindi pa rin pumasok si probationary employee due to community quarantine. So pwede pa raw po
Ah,
bang i-extend?
yung 14A po kasi, sinasabi doon that if the person cannot report to work
Mm.
on account of the pandemic, it may be considered. But for the employers, please make sure this is documented because this may be taken against you if not documented. Remember, extension of probationary period should be based on the request of the employee. Hindi pwedeng si
Correct.
employer magsabi na i-extend kita ha without the request from the employee. Mako-consider po siyang regular employee na. So for employers, please make sure na the employee himself request for such exception.
Ayan. Is it okay to implement compressed work this time?
Yes, it's also included as an alternative work arrangement. So if you're referring to compressed work week, whereby instead of eight hours a day for 5 days a week, you're gonna make it 10 hours a day for 4 days a week. Matagal na pong gusto ni DOLE yan because it helps in the work-life balance of an employee. Especially now, liliit ang exposure ng employee sa public eh. Since you'll be home 3 days a week instead of just 2 days a week. So the
Okay.
answer is yes.
Okay. Sandali lang po. Sobrang dami ng ating questions. Hindi na ako makapag-scroll. Paano if an employee can't go to work kasi nasa province pa po siya since March? What shall we do?
Okay. You need to report to your employer na ganun po yung situation. Uh, like going to Manila, bihira pa rin, or I don't know if there is na provincial bosses, which makes it a challenge for employees to report back to work. But what is important is you keep in touch with your employers. Kasi otherwise po, baka sabihin, nag-awol na kayo.
Correct. Correct. So always reach out to your employer para alam po nila na kayo ay nahihirapang mag-travel. Is the company required to have a company nurse or first aider will do?
Company nurse is required depending on the number.
Okay po. Ano po bang number ang required para mag-hire ng full-time company nurse? Kasi alam ko 'di ba meron pa yung part-time eh, pwedeng mag-hire ng part-time lang.
Oo.
Oo. Ang suggestion ko po sa inyo is check the code pagdating po sa safety and health standards. Naka-indicate po diyan kung anong headcount ang kailangan niyo para ma-require po kayo ng part-time nurse or ng full-time nurse.
Or
Do'n niyo po
doctor
makikita.
or dentist.
Yes, doctor and
So,
dentist din po.
if the employer, wait ha, ang full-time registered nurse is needed pag ang employees mo exceeds 50, but not more than 200. Except kung hazardous yun yung industry mo or your workplace is hazardous. And then, pag hazardous kasi kahit less than 50 yan, you need a full-time
Ay,
nurse.
oo. Kailangan na.
And then, full-time nurse, part-time physician, and a dentist, and an emergency clinic if it exceeds 200 but not more than 300. Kailangan pa ba natin mas mataas doon? Or okay na tayo doon?
Okay na tayo doon. Okay. So, importante po na meron po kayo at least part-time na nurse. Reviewin niyo din po. Meron po yung guidelines on safety
Book
and health
4.
standards po natin. Yun po. Check niyo po yun. Nandun po yun lahat.
Book 4 of the labor code.
Yes, book 4. How long should the employer take? How long does the employer have to not hire a position once they are declared redundant? So, gaano katagal bago sila po pwede ulit mag-hire for the same position? Kung dineclare nila as redundant.
Kami yung ginagamit namin is 1 year.
Okay.
As long as
Alam ko nila 1 year.
it's not pay.
Oo. Safest po natin is 1 year actually. Even in the companies that I've worked with in the past, ang practice din namin is 1 year. Tapos if may need, at saka na lang ulit kami mag-hire. Pero yun nga, ingat po tayo sa pagde-declare ng position na redundant. Kasi baka naman hindi naman talaga redundant siya in the first place. We're trying to just circumvent the law baka lalo lang po tayong sumabit. So
Kulang
careful.
natin tanggalin, wala lang tayong makuhang
Oo.
rason or redundant. So,
Oo. So mahirap po
again,
'yan.
always good faith dapat.
Opo. Yung mga umattend po ng HR bootcamp ko dati, like ko ini-emphasize sa inyo, always in good faith. Kasi 'pag hindi po 'yan in good faith, sasabit po tayo diyan. What if si employer pina-rapid test lang si employee na nagkaroon ng direct contact with COVID patient and hindi siya pina-PCR test? Is the employer liable by law?
No. Again, ang sinasabi mo is for front to back naman ulit. Sorry.
Ay, sorry.
Okay. So, dapat to quarantine to direct contact. Okay. So, dapat naka-quarantine siya. And then, pag may symptoms, even the LGU can require yung testing. Hindi siya pina-PCR test. Is the employer liable by law? Walang requirement to do that if you're a direct contact. And for direct contact, requirement is you be declared and then to monitor you and then self-quarantine.
Okay po. Next question po. What if rapid test ang binigay ng company and their employees who tested positive? Shoulder pa rin po ba ng company ang follow-up swab test?
Well, the swab test, if it will be required by the employer, should be shouldered by the employer. Kung kunyari, gagawin ni employer na requirement yon for you to go back to work, then dapat i-shoulder ni employer. Which they can course through the health insurance.
What if si employee under probationary, una ayaw pumasok, nagkaroon ng family problem kaya lalong di nakapasok, still no feedback kung papasok or hindi. Ano po ang legal na gawin sa kanya?
Return to work order po natin. Give him the appropriate notice to return to work and explain why he hasn't been showing up and adhering to company policy on proper notification on absences and explain why he hasn't been showing up. Tapos lagay niyo po doon that should he not reply, you will consider it as an act of abandonment. Very important po na meron yung term na abandonment because that is your basis for terminating him after. Make sure po i-send nyo to via all available avenues, especially registered mail.
Yes. So, pwede po kayo mag-return to work order at pwede nyo na po yung daanan sa disciplinary action. If employee is confirmed to have COVID, is there a report that should be sent to DOLE, like on a monthly basis?
Yes
Meron po.
That's the WAIR, W-A-I-R, Workplace Accident Illness Report. So kasama po yan even sa inspection, you are required to present na nire-report nyo sa DOLE yung mga positive cases.
Dapat po ba i-reimburse ang mga nagastos ni employee sa gamot dahil nag-positive siya sa COVID? Hindi po.
No requirement po.
Wala pong requirement. Hindi required si employer. Can you help us in preparing for the business continuity plan? The business continuity plan is actually something that your organization should prepare along with all the other managers, department heads, etc. Although may mga templates online, but kayo po ang nakakaalam kung ano yung mga kino-consider nyo na situations or high-risk situations na dapat kasama doon sa business continuity plan. May mga templates po yan online. Work with your department heads, with top management, and work with your lawyers sa kung paano yung ika-craft yung inyong business continuity plan. Although Uprosh can help you with that for a fee. If employee is confirmed to have COVID while working from home, nasagot na pala natin ito. For private hospital setting, if our employees have symptoms, are we required to shoulder the expense for the swab test? Private hospital po. I am assuming na itong employees na to yung mga nila. Sorry?
If the company will require it as a condition for you to go back, then the employer will be shouldering it. Kaya sabi kanina, sa labor advisory, si employer yung mag-shoulder.
Okay. So
For the
basta ni-require ni employer, si employer po ang sasagot. Okay? If the employee got COVID positive, is there a possible benefits like sick leave, should pay all or leave without pay? Depende po yan kung meron pa po siyang existing leave credits. Mag-fall po ito under management prerogative. So kung meron pa po siya existing leave credits, pwede po niyang gamitin yan. Pwede rin po siyang mag-apply sa SSS. Iko-cover po yan ng SSS and iko-cover din po yan ng employees compensation. Okay, pero kung kay company po, hindi sila required na i-shoulder yung panahon na ikaw po ay nagpapagaling from COVID or ikaw ay under treatment for COVID. Kung wala pong leave credits, wala na po. Without leave, without pay na po mangyayari. I would like to inquire if extension of probies 1 month due to lockdown or based po sa number of months ng lockdown. Kasi yung ating ECQ is mas matagal sa 1 month eh. ECQ and MECQ.
6 sa 14 is 1 month eh. Yung 14A kasi na for the duration of the pandemic, again, for purposes of the 6-month probationary period, the period during which the enhanced or general community quarantine is enforced where the establishment has temporarily ceased or closed operation and or the worker was temporarily not required to report for work on account thereof is not included. So, ibig sabihin po, if si company ang nagsabi sa'yo, o pandemic pa eh, so wag ka muna mag-report. So, hindi siya kasama.
Okay, so po pwedeng more than 1 month siya.
More than 1 month, oo.
Okay. So, yun po. If after 14 days ng quarantine, at employee tested positive nung first swab test niya, after ng quarantine niya ng 14 days, at nagpa-swab test ulit siya, si employer bang sasagot or si employee? I think this will go back to sa sinabi kanina ni Attorney Mel na if it is required by the employer as a condition for returning back to work, this should be shouldered by the employer. Okay, so kung consider po, kung asymptomatic naman siya, I don't see any reason bakit hindi siya mapapa-return to work. What do you think, attorney?
Same, Ron. I agree with you na hindi naman talaga siya mapapabalik. Positive pa din siya, diba?
Oo. Okay, so what if probationary period? Hindi ba tatanggalin kung sakaling mag-refuse to work si employee due to this pandemic?
No po, we cannot do that because again, this is considered as imminent danger. So, DOLE will allow na wag po nating i-require na hindi siya makapasok. I'm sorry.
Okay. So, clarification lang dito kung kayo po ay naka-probationary period, hindi po absolute yung hindi kayo pwedeng tanggalin sa work. Hindi po yun absolute. Hindi lang kayo po pwedeng tanggalin sa work dahil lang sa ayaw nyong mag-work due to imminent threat or presence of imminent threat. Now, let's say tayo po ay nasa GCQ na at si employer ay nag-a-adhere dun sa lahat po ng requirements to lessen yung imminent threat or to make sure that the workplace is safe. Maaari po kayong ma-disciplinary action for refusal to report for work. Lalo na kung si employer ginawa na nila lahat to ensure na the workplace is already safe. Okay, so hindi po absolute ito kasi marami po nagsasabi na ay pandemic pa, hindi ako po pwedeng i-terminate. Hindi po yan absolute. Okay po? Next question po natin, who should shoulder the payment for succeeding swab test for employees na nire-require ng checkpoints? I think nasagot na natin ito kanina. Since this is part of their work, this should be covered by the employer. Ay, medyo malaki yung susunod. Natakba na tayo. We have Probi employees due for regularization last April and May due to the labor advisories. The first one stated not counted po while on quarantine. Then another one was released last May na if company did not cease operations, then the work performed is counted. Therefore, our Probi employees technically got regularized without having performance appraisals. As part of documentation, I required the superiors to submit their evaluations. Now, what if poor yung evaluation? Is there anything, I think ang susunod dito, is there anything we can do about it? Dire-diretso yung kanilang dire-diretso yung kanilang operations. I think na technical na kayo.
Default na yan. Regularized
Oo,
by default.
oo. So, pag ganyan, siguro ang ma-advise ko lang doon sa mga HR na nag-handle, doon kayo palagi sa sabi nga natin, err on the side of caution. I-assume nyo na yung 6 months hindi mapuputol. Okay, so mag-issue man ng labor advisory, at least madali kayo makakapag-adjust. Kesa doon sa i-assume nyo na pwedeng i-extend, tapos biglang hindi pala po pwede. So, ganon. Tsaka, always do two performance appraisals, third month and fifth month, para meron kayong
May
basis
need
palagi.
kayo dapat.
Oo, correct. Clarification po, for private hospital settings, are the employers required to give hazard pay for frontliners or discretion po ng management? Private hospital po ito.
Yung sa in-announce ni Duterte, diba? Yung hazard
Oo.
pay.
Oo, may hazard pay na sila. What if si company binigyan ka lang ng work schedule once a week tapos yung deductions mo ng statutory benefits buo like before the pandemic happened and they stop na yung hazard pay kasi sabi walang income ang company, especially construction kasi sila. So once a week yung pasok mo pero dinidedakan ka pa rin ng full amount ng SSS PhilHealth Pag-ibig. Ay, required po kasi ito eh. Si SSS PhilHealth at Pag-ibig ay required po. So madededakan po talaga kayo. Pag pumasok kayo. Oo.
No choice yan eh.
Oo, at saka at the end of the day, magagamit niyo rin kasi ito kasi kung tuloy-tuloy pa rin yung inyong contributions, in case na matanggalan kayo ng trabaho, wag naman sana, pero in case na mangyari yun, mas madali kayong makakapag-apply for unemployment benefit dahil may required po na specific number of contributions for 12 months, if I remember correctly, 12 months prior sa kung kailan kayo na terminate. So okay na yun. Kayo din naman yung makakagamit. If company has to reduce the number of working days, are salaries reduced too, even if employees are monthly paid?
Yes.
Yes po. Oo. Kasi kaya nga nire-reduce yung number of working days para din tulong din kasi ito ni DOLE sa mga employer, sa mga company para hindi sila basta-basta magsara. They are allowing companies to reduce yung working days para ma-reduce din yung kailangan bayaran ni company sa kanila.
Kesa po mas maraming mawalan ng trabaho.
Yes. What if the employee wasn't available to report to work during ECQ? I think nasagot na po ito. If they are not available to report, they are not required to report, po pwedeng ma-extend yung kanilang 6-month probationary period. Tama po ba, attorney?
Correct, correct.
Okay po. Si employee ay hindi nakasama sa rapid test schedule ng company if magpa-test siya on his own, sino mag-shoulder ng cost? Si employer or si employee?
If he will be tested on his own, si employee yun.
Okay, so kung magvo-volunteer ka po na mag-undergo ng testing, ikaw po, pero kung i-require ka ni employer dahil hindi ka nakasama dati, tapos ni-require ka nila na magpa-rapid test, dapat si employer po. If a person or an employee is under floating status, do we need to report to DOLE?
Yes po. RKS 5.
Okay, RKS 5 po. Meron pong online version po niya na.
Yes. There is a new online version yan.
So, dun po sa ating comment section, nilagay ko na po yung link kung saan nyo makikita yung online. If hindi nyo po nakita, reports.dole.gov.ph. Dun po kayo po pwedeng mag-report online. APE is a yearly requirement. Can this be deferred for the year because of the pandemic? What is the impact to DOLE audit or requirements? Sasagutin ko po muna ito base sa point of view ng isang competent person. Ang inyo pong HMO kasama po sa contract niyan ay APE. Usually yung HMO coverage nyo kasama sa contract niyan ay APE. So kung hindi nyo magagamit yun, sayang. The best way to do it is to get in touch with your HMO provider and have it scheduled na instead of on-site, then usually ginagawa ng mga companies, get the employees to go to the nearest branch nung kung sino man yung HMO provider or nearest partner clinics, tapos dun sila magpapa-APE. Para na enjoy pa rin nila yung benefit nila, meron pa rin kayong copy or meron pa rin kayong monitoring nung kanilang annual physical exam. So yun yung ano ko diyan, yun yung from point of view ng compend din. Kung kayo po ay kung yung APE nyo is part siya ng package ng inyong HMO program. Attorney, ano pong masasabi mo?
Correct.
Yun. So yun ho yung po pwede nyong gawin. Okay, provision, sorry, nasagot na natin to. What will be the attachment for RKS report to DOLE if it's a retrenchment or a flexible work arrangement? Meron po ba mga attachments na required?
For the RKS, wala tayong attach because all the information that's needed is already there. For
Okay, so
CWW, yung changing, kasi kailangan yun may consent of those who will be affected, ina-attach po natin yung consent form doon.
okay, so sa CWW lang po meron, pero sa RKS po wala na po kailangan.
Wala na.
If an employee refused to go to work kasi merong tumataas yung number ng COVID cases sa office at hindi siya inallow na mag-work from home na lang, sinabihan siya na mag-file na lang ng leave, is this a valid decision from the management? Ayaw niyang pumasok kasi maraming COVID positive at hindi rin siya pinayagang mag-work from home. Pwede ba siyang i-puwersahin or i-force na gamitin na lang ang leave credits niya?
We should always keep in mind that telecommuting is voluntary based on the agreement between the parties. Now, employers are required to have this program and implement it in good faith. Now, if the employer cannot justify bakit hindi ka pwedeng work from home, even if you will be able to prove na you have stable internet connection, you have a workplace that you can use, you can protect the data, then the employer may be sued by the employee. Pwede yung grounds for constructive dismissal na kasi you're making it hard for the employee to continue working.
Oo, na wala na
So,
siyang
may
choice kung hindi wag na lang pumasok at walang sweldohin.
mag-resign na lang ako, diba? Oo. So,
Correct. Kung ang isang employee po ay naka-floating status, required ba na 30 days notice pa rin kay DOLE pag ni-retrench sila? Naka-forced leave sila. Kailangan pa rin ba yung 30 days? Okay, so kailangan pa din po. Okay. Another question in relation to holiday pay. Since reduction of workdays is allowed during pandemic, what if an employee's work schedule does not fall on the scheduled non-working holiday? Does he or she get paid for the holiday? Ako na po ang sasagot nito. Pagdating po kasi pagdating po kasi sa holiday pay, okay, pag nag-fall siya doon sa rest day ni empleyado, holiday po ang pinag-uusapan na regular holiday. Pag nag-fall po siya sa rest day ni empleyado, considered na bayad po siya in normal setting. Okay? Ngayon po, dahil sa lalo na kung hindi naman nagpa-practice ng flexible working arrangement or dire-diretso pa rin naman yung operations kung dire-diretso pa rin yung operations ng isang company, ganun pa rin yung susundin niyo. Nag-fall siya sa rest day, kailangan yung bayaran. Ngayon, kung kayo po ay naka-flexible working arrangement, okay, mag-iiba po yung setup nyo. Okay, kasi ang pag naka-flexible po kayo, like for example, job rotation at hindi po kayo araw-araw pumapasok, pwede po kayo mag-defer. Okay, pwede kayo mag-defer. I-defer nyo na lang po. Kasi technically, dapat bayad pa rin sila ng holiday pay. Holiday pay is guaranteed po yan eh. Hindi siya katulad ni special holiday premium na no work, no pay. Si holiday po ay guaranteed po yan sa empleyado. Ang pwede nyo lang gawin is either i-defer nyo pag back to normal na ulit yung operations or babayaran nyo siya kung kailan siya na-earn or kung kailan siya dapat na-enjoy. Another question po, if the employee advised the company should undergo 14 days but the swab test got negative, posible ba na they are not deducted for their absences? So pinag-quarantine siya ng 14 days, I am assuming without pay, pero after noon nag-negative yung swab test niya. Pupuwede bang, not deducted yung kanilang absences?
No po, because the quarantine period is really required by the government.
Okey po.
So, as long as you are a direct contact tapos or symptomatic ka, even if mag-negative ka in the end, ibabawas pa din yun.
Okay. So medyo, time's up na po tayo at 7 PM na at marami pa din po akong questions na nakapila. So ganito po, yung kuha na lang po tayo ng last po natin na hindi pa natin nasasagot kanina. So, let me see. Okay. Summarize ko lang kasi yung ibang questions ay medyo pare-pareho lang. So, summarize ko lang po. Pag ang inyo pong swab test ay ni-require ni employer, shouldered by employer. Kung nag-volunteer po kayo na mag-swab test kahit na wala namang requirement, then sagot niyo po yung swab test. Okay? Ang inyo pong, ang rapid test po ay hindi magandang basihan. Okay? Kasi nagfo-false positive po siya. So, as much as possible, swab test po, hindi po yung rapid test. Now, pag kayo po ay nagkaroon ng close contact sa kahit na sinong positive, COVID positive or symptomatic na empleyado, ang first step niyo po ay kailangan niyo pong mag-self-quarantine for 14 days. Okay po, importante po 'yun. Kung ito po ay sa company, employers po, kailangan niyo pong, mai-report pag meron po kayong mga, positive or or symptomatic, may symptoms po, symptomatic na mga employees po. Kailangan po itong mai-report sa inyong local government unit kasi kinakailangan po 'yan ni DOH para naman dun sa kanilang pagbibilang ng cases. Okay, so importante po yung reporting na 'yon. Kung kayo po ay probationary employee, okay? At kayo po ay inabutan ng pandemic, pinatigil po kayo sa pagtatrabaho, let's say for a month, dahil MECQ or dahil ECQ, maaari pong i-extend ang inyong probationary period. So pupuwede po kayong ma-extend, depende po sa kung gaano katagal kayo napatigil sa pagtatrabaho. Kung dire-diretso po ang trabaho, wala pong reason para, mapa-extend, dapat ang inyong pong employer ay meron ng sapat na basehan para kayo po ay either i-appoint to regular position or sabihan po kayo na, hindi niyo na-meet yung standards for the position. Pagdating naman po sa mga holidays, puwede niyong i-defer, okay? Lalo na kung kayo po ay temporarily hindi nagwo-work, puwede niyo pong i-defer ang payment. Ngunit kung kayo po ay totally close na, nagsara na po, hindi po kayo required na bayaran pa yung, holiday pay noong, inyong mga empleyado. Kung kayo naman po ay dire-diretso ang inyong operations, required pa rin po kayo na bayaran ang holiday pay. Kasi technically wala naman po naging stop sa operations niyo. So hindi kayo po puwedeng basta lang mag-defer, okey? Kung kayo po ay magre-retrench at magko-consider ng position na redundant, required pa rin po kayo ng 30 days. RKS 5 pa rin po ang kailangan niyong submit na report para doon. May online version na po nito, pupuwede niyo pong gamitin 'yoon. Monthly, every end of the month required po kayong mag-submit ng wire o kung ano man yung pronunciation nun, WAIR. Dito po nakalagay kung meron po kayong mga cases na may COVID positive, dito niyo po ilalagay doon, required po lahat ng companies na mag-submit niyaan. Meron pong, sample form niyan, yung 2020 version po ang kunin niyo, meron po niyan online. Wag po yung luma, kasi may lumang version ng wire. So yung bagong version po, yung 2020 version, yun po ang kukunin niyo, yun po ang isa-submit niyo na report. Okay? I think yun yung buod ng karamihan ng ating mga, questions, okay? Kung kayo po ay nag-a-apply for SSS, unemployment benefit, may certificate po na kailangan niyan na kailangan niyo pong hingin kay DOLE. Kung kayo naman po ay nag-a-apply for benefits, let's say, yung calamity loan assistance, di-discuss po natin yan next Saturday. Hindi po today kasi today po ay for labor law compliance lang po tayo. Okay? Tapos po, ano pa ba, kung kayo po ay nagtatrabaho sa isang agency or meron po kayong hinire na agency, ang PPEs po, generally dapat sagot po yaan ng, um Okay. I think nakalagay ata sa labor advisory number 18 na principal should be the ones to shoulder the cost of PPEs. So check nyo lang po yung labor advisory number 18. Kung hindi nyo po makita, best din po na makipag-usap kayo doon sa agency. Okay? So check nyo po doon kung ano po yung po pwede nyong gawin. Okay? Posible po na kayo po ay bawasan ng number of hours or number of days na work dahil tayo po ay nasa pandemic. So inaalaw po yan as a way to help yung mga employers para hindi sila basta-basta magsara kagad. Ito po yung tinatawag natin na flexible work arrangements. Doon po ito pumapasok. Okay? Pero dapat, katulad ng sinasabi natin kanina, this should be done in good faith kasi kung ito po ay ginagawa to circumvent existing labor laws, maaari po kayong sumabit dyan. Okay po. Tapos, ang hazard pay po ay hindi po required sa private institutions, public hospitals lang po ang required na meron pong hazard pay. Private hospitals, frontliners po, nagkaroon na po ng pronouncement dyan, si President Duterte. So yun po, covered po sila ng hazard pay. Ano pa ba ang mga nandito mga questions? Okay, for the rest po, since hindi na po natin maa-address lahat po ng inyong mga questions, okay, pwede po kayong mag-send sa amin ng email and we'll try to answer your questions po. But pinaka ano po namin, pinaka request po namin sa inyo is go through the labor advisories first. Okay? Yung labor advisories po ay available po yan sa website ng DOLE. Makikita nyo po dyan kung ano yung mga kailangan nyo i-adhere or tandaan. Magkakaroon din po tayo ng labor cases and labor relations webinar this coming September. So if you're still at a loss on how to handle all of these things, we encourage you to attend our labor relations and labor cases webinar. Okay po? So bago po tayo mag-end, let me just invite everyone to our Building Your Corporate Culture happening on August 19. This is the best time to build, review, and rebuild your corporate culture. So if you are unsure yet on how you want your culture to be, ang suggestion ko sa inyo is to attend this webinar. This is happening on August 19. Pwede po kayong pumunta dyan sa website na yan or you can take a screenshot of the QR code para po kayo po ay makapag-register. We also have a basics of employee engagement happening on August 22 para po doon sa mga nabitin sa employee engagement last time. So po pwede po kayong umattend yan. It's happening on August 22. We'll go back to the basics of employee engagement and how you can set up ang employee engagement nyo. Tandaan, ang employee engagement ay hindi lang po events. Maraming bagay po yan. Para po, ito po ang hinihintay ng lahat. Para po sa mga may kailangan ng certificate of attendance, ito po ang ating QR code. Pakikuha po ito, pakikunan po ng picture yung QR code para po kayo po ay makapag-register for the certificate of attendance. Since we have more than what we had expected as attendees. Pasensya na po kayo. Nasobrahan po ang dami na umattend today. So yung mga nag-register na po dati, if ever po hindi nyo pa nakukuha ang inyong certificate of attendance by Thursday, if hindi nyo pa makuha by Thursday, register lang po kayo dito. Ipopost din natin ito dun sa ating event page para makapag-register po kayo, para makakuha pa rin po kayo ng certificate of attendance. Again po, kung meron po tayong mga questions, maaari po kayong mag-email sa amin. We'll try to help you as best as we can. Or mag-message po kayo dun sa page natin. We'll try to help you as best as we can. One final question lang po. If an employee filed for resignation during pandemic, is the employer required to include on his final pay the deferred payment of holiday pays? Yes po. Okay, pag nag-resign po sila, required po kayo na isama yun sa final pay. Kasi na-earn naman nila yun eh. Yun po ay karapatan po nilang may enjoy. So kasama po talaga yun. Okay po. So attorney, any last words, any pluggings na meron ka po?
So, in case you want to refer somebody na naghahanap ng trabaho, Teleperformance is hiring.
Okay.
You're all Yun lang.
Anong position ba yan? Anong position ang meron tayo sa Teleperformance?
Madami. We have from agents up to vice president. We have openings.
Okay, let's talk about the vice president after this. Joke lang. Anyways, maraming po.
Sorry, last
Maraming
lang.
salamat po. Yes po, go ahead po.
Oh, pwede ba? Magpapaka-feeling lang ako. I just like to say hi to my family. So,
Go
hi,
ahead,
my
sige
mom,
po.
my dad, Lenny, Franco, Zatienza, Chris, ang aking brother na nasa SEA Games. He's from PAL also. Martin, my OFW brother in Singapore. My husband, Carlo, Clarice, Sophia, and Scott, my angels, of course. Yan lang. Thank you, Ron.
Maraming salamat po, attorney. And for our viewers for today, maraming salamat po. Sorry po do sa mga hindi na namin na-accommodate na questions, but you can still email us and we'll try to guide you on how to handle it. We would also suggest that you attend the HR Bootcamp Batch 13. Marami po kayong matututunan doon. We have a small community of HR Bootcamp attendees and we usually share information with them and they get to ask for HR consultation every now and then whenever they need it. So again, maraming salamat po and we hope to see you next Saturday when we discuss about handling compensation and benefits during COVID-19. So magandang discussion na naman po 'yan for next week. Just go to our events page. Nandun po lahat ng mga events namin, both paid and free. Pwede po kayong mag-register doon. Again, thank you everyone for being with us and we hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Bye everyone!
Bye.